Now, 2015 has not been the easiest year in our bilateral relationship, particularly with respect to our policy disagreement on the nuclear agreement negotiated by the P5+1 with Iran. It was an honest disagreement between two close allies with, frankly, an identical strategic objective of preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, but with different ideas about the best way to achieve it. Now, policy disagreements are certainly not unprecedented in the long history of this relationship, but the day-to-day media coverage, with its intense focus on the personal relationship between our leaders and the political environments in both countries, do tend to magnify the differences and significantly underplay our two nations' extensive achievements, our two leaders' achievements in security cooperation during the same period. As someone who participated in the meeting last week in the White House, as well as in every meeting these two leaders have had since coming to office in 2009, I can tell you that neither leader denied their recent disagreements, but they didn't dwell on them either. Both leaders took a forward-looking approach and used this meeting as an opportunity to resume their serious and focused cooperation on a wide range of shared security interests. So I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the key issues that they covered in this meeting. First, the Iran nuclear agreement. As Vice President Biden clearly stated again last week, we simply will not permit Iran to acquire nuclear weapons, period. That's the whole purpose of this agreement. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is going to keep Iran farther away from a nuclear weapon for a longer period of time and with greater transparency and monitoring than any other alternative. It will also enable the international community to respond with a full range of options to any efforts by Iran to circumvent the agreement. Those options include partial or full snapback of international sanctions and even the use of military force. Iran has a long list of steps it must take to downgrade its nuclear program before it will receive a single dollar of sanctions relief. These include removing thousands of centrifuges from Natanz and Fordow, disposing of its stockpile of enriched uranium, disabling its heavy water reactor at Arak, addressing the possible past military dimension of its nuclear program, and setting up a highly intrusive system of inspections and monitoring. All these steps need to be certified by the IAEA, and together, these steps will block every path Iran could take to a nuclear weapon during the term of the agreement, and likely well beyond that. Our focus now shifts to enforcement, to monitoring, to verification. And at the White House, President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed on the importance of holding Iran's feet to the fire to ensure that it fully complies with its obligations under the agreement. Israeli input and recommendations, frankly, to our American expert team helped shape the conceptual and technical aspects of the nuclear agreement. Now we look forward to further cooperation with Israeli experts on the monitoring and compliance process. Now, with the Iran nuclear program addressed, the Prime Minister and the President turned to ways to intensify our cooperation on the non-nuclear threats posed by Iran. There's no disagreement between us about Iran's upgrading of its conventional forces, including ballistic missiles, about its continued support for terrorist proxies, about its arming of Hezbollah and Hamas, about its destabilization of its neighbors, or indeed about its threats to destroy Israel. We will continue to work with Israel to combat these threats through intelligence sharing, through the interdiction of weapons transfers, and through sanctions and designations against terrorist entities. We're using many of those same tools to work with Israel to ensure its security is protected from the other threats in the region, including terrorist groups like ISIL and the Al-Nusra Front, spillover violence from the war in Syria, and instability in Israel's neighbors. Now, in view of this dangerous regional environment, the President and the Prime Minister agreed to resume senior-level talks in December with the aim of reaching a new long-term Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU, on American security assistance to Israel. This is a complex exercise. It involves appropriately identifying the threats and matching them against the most effective capabilities and systems. And along the way, Israel will have to make some significant decisions about how to prioritize different systems in its long-term acquisition planning. And of course, we all have to take into account budget realities in both countries. But our future security assistance is going to raise the bar further on the already unprecedented heights we've reached in our security cooperation, including our $3 billion in annual military assistance, an additional $1 billion in support of Iron Dome since 2010, which has had life-saving results, hundreds of millions more for the David Sling and Arrow 3 missile defense programs, extensive joint military training, expanded intelligence sharing, and many other areas. And it includes the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the most sophisticated fighter aircraft in the world. The F-35 will be the backbone of the Israeli Air Force for the next generation, and Israel is going to be the only air force in the Middle East to fly it, starting with the first arrivals 13 months from now, which I believe General Eshel are very much looking forward to. Our talks on the MOU will be undergirded by America's bedrock commitment to ensuring Israel's qualitative military edge, its QME, which is crucial to Israel's ability to defend itself by itself. This commitment is long-standing, it's nonpartisan, it reflects our moral commitment, it's buttressed by legal obligations. Frankly, it is unaffected by any other policy considerations. And I also expect this dialogue will include a broader discussion on enhanced defense cooperation in such areas as cybersecurity, intelligence, and counter-tunneling technology. The President and the Prime Minister also addressed the recent wave of violence and terrorism, the tensions at Jerusalem's holy sites, and the outlook for a two-state solution. In his public remarks from the Oval Office, President Obama reiterated America's absolute solidarity with the Israeli people in the face of Palestinian terrorism and violence against innocent citizens. He said, quote, "Israel has not just the right, but the obligation to protect itself." There's no acceptable excuse, no justification, and no legitimate basis for terrorism. We condemn it in the strongest terms, period. And we forcefully engage the Palestinian Authority leadership to stop the incitement that often stands behind it. As Israel mourns the murder of so many of its citizens, most recently Rabbi Yaakov Littman and his son Natanel Littman, Zichronam Livracha, who were gunned down just before Shabbat, and as it prays for the recovery of dozens more who were wounded, and this list includes American citizens as well, America's leaders and countless other Americans stand in steadfast solidarity with the Israeli people. With Israel, just as with France, America's condemnation, our total rejection of terror, whether it's in the form of rocks or knives or motor vehicles or guns or suicide bombers or rockets, is unequivocal and rooted in the kinship of our open and democratic societies. At their meeting, President Obama also reiterated America's commitment to assisting Israelis and Palestinians in finding durable solutions to the ongoing crisis and restoring security. Secretary Kerry effectively engaged leaders from Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority in Berlin and Amman last month, and met again last Wednesday with the Prime Minister in Washington to further explore positive steps the parties can take to ease tensions. President Obama also focused part of last week's meeting on getting back on a path toward a two states for two peoples solution. He said, quote, "Legitimate Palestinian aspirations can only be met through a political process," end quote. Now, we're realistic enough to recognize that a two-state solution will not occur during the remainder of the Obama administration. And we may indeed be in an extended period when it's not even possible to conduct negotiations. There's a grave risk, however, that during such a period, we will slide further and further toward a binational outcome that will cost Israel its Jewish or its democratic character and will not deliver Palestinians their dream of independence. The binational state outcome is not one that either side wants, but it will become increasingly likely if the current political stalemate persists. Leaders who wish to avoid such a future must think creatively and act proactively about how to prevent that outcome. So we're urging both sides to consider seriously what steps they can take, even in the absence of negotiations, that are consistent with the transition to two states envisioned by previous agreements, and at least provide some momentum in that direction until the next negotiations can take place. Our acting special envoy, Frank Lowenstein, will be in the region soon to address these issues. In our ongoing dialogue with all sides, we continue to discourage unilateral actions that damage and undermine prospects for renewing and successfully completing negotiations for a two-state solution. Such actions include Palestinian appeals to the ICC and the UN bodies, and Israeli settlement expansion and home demolitions. We also maintain a dialogue with the Israeli government about the actions it is taking to combat extremism and the importance of bringing to justice those responsible for such horrifying terrorist attacks as the arson in Duma that took the lives of 3 members of the Dawabsha family last summer. Our relationship has many other features worth upgrading and celebrating, including our extensive people-to-people connections and our burgeoning economic ties, which I'll touch just very briefly. Next month, President Obama looks forward to welcoming President Rivlin to the White House, further underscoring the close bonds between our peoples. President Rivlin has demonstrated extraordinary courage and leadership in combating extremism, encouraging coexistence and mutual understanding, and ensuring that Israel's democratic rights, responsibilities, and values and its economic opportunities extend to all of its citizens. I know President Obama looks forward to meeting President Rivlin and discussing these and other issues with them, and I think at this point it's no longer a secret that they'll also be enjoying some latkes together at the annual White House Hanukkah reception. Economics and trade are the newest and fastest rising pillar of the extraordinary U.S.-Israel alliance. The pursuit of our common prosperity and the goal of expanding economic opportunity are now fully fused into the DNA of this relationship. We've transformed a political and strategic relationship into a powerful engine for economic growth in both countries. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement, the first such agreement America signed with any nation. Since the FTA was signed in 1985, trade has multiplied more than 8-fold to nearly $50 billion. And here in Israel, we put our money where our mouth is. I'm proud that our embassy plays a vital role in supporting numerous programs for Israelis that open doors to better jobs and economic opportunities for all segments of society. Meanwhile, we never stop exploring opportunities to help Israel build regional economic ties with its neighbors. The natural gas deals with Jordan and Egypt that will be made possible by expanded offshore production will strengthen Israel's relationships with those key strategic partners. They also offer a foretaste of what might be possible once Israel finds itself at peace with the Palestinians and other Arab states. So to sum up, the state of our unique alliance is strong, and there's a robust agenda to tackle over the next year and beyond. In the months ahead, there will be debates on all the issues I've discussed, and there will be a need, no less than before, for robust reporting and public discourse. And so wide and diverse audiences will continue to rely on the Jerusalem Post for its original reporting, its thoughtful analysis, and its commitment to truth and transparency. Thank you very much.